you have somehow stumbled upon this video, I would take it as a sign from the universe to treat yourself and relax while making some delicious cinnamon rolls that you can then indulge in, and that will absolutely change your life because this recipe is a keeper. We start by making dough that is inspired by Japanese milk bread, which is super fluffy, and it's made using something called a tazong, which is this thing that you're seeing right here, which is really just milk and flour that's been whisked together over medium heat until it thickens. I let that cool to one side, and then in the bowl of a stand mixer, I add in the other wet ingredients for the dough, and they will all be in the description box below, but we've got egg, milk, sugar, some yeast. I add in the tazong, and then I started going with my stand mixer, but this wasn't really mixing through, so I stopped it, and then I just went in with a whisk, made sure that it was all thoroughly combined, and then in a separate bowl I mixed my dry ingredients, which were flour, milk powder, salt, and added that in with the wet ingredients, and then turned on to the low speed until it kind of comes together. Now it's gonna look like it's not coming together, but all you have to do is, turn off the mixer and then scrape down the sides with a spatula. That way you are getting the flour that's on the sides back into the center, and let it go again. And it's gonna look shaggy at first, but the dough will come together. So you're gonna go ahead and increase your speed onto medium speed. If you're using a KitchenAid, it's gonna be on 4, the level 4. Now, do you need a stand mixer? You don't need it, but it would be very, very handy in this specific recipe because we are actually going to mix our dough for a total of minimum 15 minutes. I actually let mine go on for 18 minutes. You could even have this go up to 20. It's gonna depend on when enough gluten has formed in your dough. So it would definitely be a lot easier if you can just use a stand mixer and let the machine do the work for you. Every couple of minutes, you want to stop it and scrape down the sides and then let it go again. So just don't forget your dough and make sure you are scraping down the sides every couple of minutes. This is what my dough looked like when it had about 7 minutes left to go to complete those 15 minutes. And then once you get to the 15 minutes, you want to do what's called a window pane test. So take a little bit of dough and separate it. And if it breaks apart like you just saw it do here, it's not ready. It hasn't formed enough gluten yet. But when you stretch it and it does this, which is it doesn't break apart and it kind of goes transparent and you can see light through it, like a window, you know your dough is ready. So at 15 minutes, my dough was not ready. I let it go for 3 more minutes, and at 18 minutes, it passed the window pane test and it was ready to go. At this point, you add in cubed butter, so softened butter that's been cut into cubes. You add that into your dough with your stand mixer going on medium. It's gonna look like it's not gonna come together again, so I increased the speed a little bit. It still was kind of not coming together, so I stopped the mixer, scraped down the sides, let it go again, scrape down the sides again, and then continued to mix. I mixed for 5 minutes, so you want to do 5 to 7 minutes at this point. And once your dough is kind of not really sticky anymore, it's done, it's perfect, it is ready to rise. So make sure that you scrape down the sides again of your bowl, and you're going to cover it with a damp cloth, and you're going to put it in a warm spot so that it will rise. It's going to be a pretty long rise. You're going to want this to rise for an hour. Onto the filling. I'm browning some butter here because you have to melt butter for the filling, and if you're melting butter, you might as well brown butter because it just tastes so much better. So to the brown butter, I add brown sugar, cinnamon, a pinch of salt, mix that together, and you have your filling ready to go. Flour the surface that you're going to work on. I moved onto my dining room table because it's marbled, so it's a really easy surface to work on, but you can use whatever you have. Put your dough onto the surface, and I'm kind of shaping it into a little bit of a square here, but I'm also making sure that both the sides are floured, that it's not going to stick to my table. Add a little bit more flour on top if needed, and then just kind of keep trying to make a square shape. That's going to make it so much easier when you roll this out, because we're going to roll out into a rectangle. For this batch that I made here, I did half a batch of a full recipe that I followed, and it gave me 8 cinnamon rolls. I'll leave the measurements of how long your rectangle should be if you are making half the recipe or if you're making the full recipe. But basically, when you're rolling, you want to make sure that you stop every once in a while and you kind of like lift your dough off the table. So you make sure that it's not sticking. You don't want to just keep on rolling and then at the end realize that your dough has stuck to the table. So once you get to the size that you need, you're gonna add your filling on, and it's gonna look like it's not enough, but it actually is. You just need to rub it into your dough. So kind of like massage the sugar onto the dough. This is actually quite relaxing. I very much enjoyed this part. I could have stayed here rubbing the sugar onto the dough for quite a while. I love baking because it's very relaxing. It kind of like brings you back into the present moment, and these rolls will definitely do that for you. So once that is done, you want to tightly roll this. So like very tightly, like slowly roll it so that it's as even as possible. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to be delicious anyways, but to try to make your best effort into making this kind of like an even little roll. You can push in the ends as you're rolling so that it's more even. And then when you're finished, you're going to pinch the dough together so that that seam doesn't open up while it's baking and like have your filling come out. So we're gonna cut the rolls now, and you can use a very sharp knife, but it's actually better to use dental floss. I know it's weird, like don't get any minty floss, just unflavored dental floss to cut is gonna give you a much cleaner cut, and it's not gonna squish down your rolls as you cut it. So you literally just like slide the floss underneath the roll and then you cut. So I like to cut mine in half first. Can we admire this beautiful swirl? Okay, cut it in half, then you cut that in half, and then each of those you cut in half. I also like to trim off the ends because the ends are like uneven and they don't have a lot of filling. So I trim that off before I do these half cuts that I said. So you are going to get 4 cinnamon rolls from each of the sides of the halves that you cut. I feel that sounds very confusing, but you can see on screen much more clearly than what I've been trying to explain here. Now, we're gonna go onto our second rise. So in a greased baking mold, you're going to add your little rolls in, snuggle them, not too tight. You wanna leave some space for them to grow because we are going to be letting them rise. So you cover it again with a damp cloth, put in a warm spot, and let it rise for 30 to 40 minutes until they look much fluffier and puffier. Now you're gonna put this into your oven that you should have been preheating prior to adding them in. You put them into your oven, and then while they're baking, we can make the delicious cream cheese glaze that is going to go on this. It uses cream cheese, powdered sugar, milk powder, and milk. And I like to make it runny, not like a thick frosting, but like runny. You mix all that together, and the flavor and just texture of this is absolutely amazing. I also like to add a pinch of salt into it for, balance and flavors. Once my rolls had baked for 15 minutes, I took them out and I covered them with tin foil because I didn't want them to brown any longer. Part of a soft cinnamon roll is not over baking them. So I baked them for 5 more minutes for a total of 20 minutes. And right when they came out of the oven, I poured my cream cheese glaze on top. This is another trick to make them super just soft and gooey and sticky. It is so much better to put your glaze on while they're warm. It's also so much better to eat your cinnamon rolls while they're warm. So I did not take too long to just go ahead and dig in to this tray, took a little pick for the gram, and then dug straight into my cinnamon roll. I'm obsessed with the center of the cinnamon roll. It's absolutely elite, so I just went straight for that, and you can see from my face here, just the flavor, it deserved a little happy dance. These are amazing. It's such a wonderful activity. Yes, you have to have patience, but it's completely worth it, and they are so delicious. I hope you enjoy.